When you write poems that have good rhythm, or when you read poems that have good rhythm, how does that make you feel?
Home. It makes me feel at home with myself, like at one with myself.
My name is Quyên Nguyễn-Hoàng. I'm a writer, a translator, and occasionally an art curator. I'm a part of the 2022 Knight-Hennessy cohort, and I'm in my third year of my PhD program in art history. I imagine a world where poetry is not a luxury, as Audre Lorde put it. It's a world where we are attuned to, and even a little bit in love with, the light, the rhythm, the vibration, the breath, the dream that's always running around us, through us, as us.
Welcome to the Imagine a World podcast from Knight-Hennessy Scholars. We are here to give you a glimpse into the Knight-Hennessy scholar community of graduate students, spanning all 7 Stanford schools, including business, education, engineering, humanities, law, medicine, and sustainability. In each episode, we talk with scholars about the world they imagine and what they are doing to bring it to life.
Hi everyone, this is Imagine the World. I am your co-host Max.
And I'm your other co-host Ashley.
And we're here with Quyên, an art history PhD. And stay tuned, we've got a lot of cool stuff to talk about.
I was born in a small hospital in Hanoi, Vietnam. My mom had to undergo a C-section because I refused to come out into the world. I went to public schools near my neighborhood where I grew up, and I was always good at studying, which pleased my parents and which got me into a good university. I went to Stanford as an undergrad on a scholarship. 4 years later, I graduated with a degree in art history and comparative literature. So not just one useless major, but 2, in my parents' opinion. So that strained our relationship a little bit. But they have forgiven me, and we love each other again now. After graduation, I worked for 5 years in contemporary art and poetry in Vietnam, which was a beautiful experience. I learned so much. Though towards the end of that period in my work at a really great gallery in Saigon, I was feeling like I was doing more administrative things than heart-moving, soul-stirring work. And I was also missing the feeling of swimming in words and books and libraries and my own imagination. So I applied to graduate school. And so here I am, back at Stanford, as a PhD candidate this time. So it's been a wild, circular ride around the world and back.
So here's an extract from a poem I wrote called To Translate into the Moon. I'll read a little bit from the English version first, and then a little bit from the Vietnamese. Vapors of a century flowed up goldly from the river, running across the land, a land without land, a land without end. Self-hidden fairies keep singing in a tongue no human speaks. All this breath of night, all this air of dream, calling out to nobody as it rises from no ground. It has no center, a nothing that stares into a nothing. A revelation so empty, it is immense as illusions, drowning as dews, foamy as shadows, sudden as lightning, delirious as eyeballs, phantom as magic. Sương khói của những thế kỷ chảy dài, đất vô danh, những vong tiên hát, tiếng thanh khiết, không ai nói, một hơi thở, một khí chiêm bao, không đứng, không cần, trọng tâm một hư không, nhìn hư không, mộng ảo, sương xa, bào ảnh, mắt loạn, huyễn thuật, điện chớp. And for those who don't read Vietnamese, what I just did is that I just read some words from the Vietnamese, sort of interruptedly. So it was almost as if I read the English as vapors of a century, land without land, air of dream, nobody rises, no center, drowning as dews, phantom as magic.
Beautiful. So when you have the pauses in the Vietnamese, like you're trying to segment them based on the English language version?
More like my own rhythm, more like improvisationally, what feels right at the time. So every time I read a poem, it is read differently. So it gives me the feeling that it's a fresh new text, which is also an old text. Yeah, so there's no calculation or measure. If I do my reading again now, it would be differently phrased.
Every time you interpret it, every time you read it, it's a living poem.
Yeah, I want the poetry to mirror how we are. I think it's the foundation of change that's important to me when I think about poetry, that it's not stable.
Have you always been interested in poetry?
I would say it's a form of literature that I was interested in when I was younger, mostly because I thought it was shorter than like the prosaic stuff that I had to read in school. And so there's something about, again, rhythm, some interest in breath, and something almost mnemonic about poetry because it's shorter, it has rhythm, it has repetition, that I was drawn to it from a very young age. But of course, when I was a kid, I didn't know that there are these sort of formal elements that draw me to poetry. But as I grow older and think about it, there's some constitution in the language of poetry that I think is interesting. It's almost like music, but it's textual.
There's an attention to every single word, every single placement and order of language.
Yes, yeah. An extreme carefulness and mindfulness. And also mindlessness, the combination of you're almost like you're forgetting time when you're composing poetry, but you're also so attentive to the language. So you're both. That's why I said I think you're both so mindful of the language, but also it feels like a mindless process as well, at least to me.
It's almost to have to let go of it a little bit. If you think too hard about poetry, because I took this poetry class as part of my creative writing minor at Stanford. And there was a lot of times when I was trying to compose poetry where I was just thinking too hard, like, oh, I have to create the right image, I have to do whatever it is, but just like letting go. And this makes me wonder about, what was the first poem you wrote? Can you remember?
Oh, wow. It's hard to sort of pin down a first because I think I wrote a lot of bad poetry when I was in college.
That counts.
I think it counts. And I think it's only because we have the stuff we call the bad poetry that we have stuff later we think it's a little bit better. But I love this idea that you brought up about letting go. I'm still learning to let go when I write poetry. It's really hard because it's an art about controlling language. So you have to come in with some kind of control, although I don't like the word because it's so opposite to letting go. And I feel like philosophically, emotionally, somatically, I'm more about letting go, like more about release than actually contraction and keeping things in and keeping things perfectly crafted. Like I'm the sort of writer who doesn't love to talk about craft because I love to talk about improvisation. Like I don't think there are formula that we should follow when we talk about literature and art. So yeah, that was just a thought when you said, let go. And the first poem, I cannot pin down.
That's completely okay. I feel like we just have like a little bit of a fever dream of like earlier works. And you kind of mentioned that you would think of them to be bad. And I'm very curious about like, why do you think that your earlier works were bad in your perspective?
Yeah. What makes good poetry and bad poetry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'm also learning to sort of let go of the good-bad distinction. I think as human beings, and even as artists or poets, we're often trained to think of, we have to sort of distinguish and judge and assess things as bad or not complete or unfinished or not well-crafted as opposed to good or somehow attractive or perfect or good-looking. Things that work and things that don't. But again, I think returning to my sort of originary love of poetry for its rhythm, then I guess as long as a piece of poetry feels rhythmically true, and to me, I would sort of imperfectly call it good, but I don't mean it to be sort of more perfect than other poetry. It just means that at this point, this is a poetry that most true and most honest and most aligned with my rhythm. And I guess the stuff that I make that I think of as bad now, maybe they feel a little bit too rigid or not true in terms of rhythm. Like I'm trying to craft something that's maybe too controlled or too perfected and not reflecting maybe the sort of messier and more chaotic breath or rhythm that I have. So yeah, it's more like an attunement. Maybe I think of poetry as attuned or not attuned to me.
When you write poems that have good rhythm, or when you read poems that have good rhythm, how does that make you feel?
Home. It makes me feel at home with myself, like at one with myself. Because, and I guess this feeling, especially at Stanford, where we're so busy most of the time and we're asked to move so much more quickly than we might prefer to move. It feels like, well, at least to me, I feel a little bit alienated from my rhythm, alienated from my body. And so when I write poetry, when I read poetry about other people, which is honestly something that I prefer to do, it's almost like, oh, yeah, I'm reminded of my rhythm, of my earth, which is the body. And then I feel at home. So it's crazy that just the sonic atmosphere of a poem can do that. At least in my body, I find it quite magical that way when you're returned to your rhythm.
When do you find that there's specific times you're drawn to write poetry? Is it like maybe when you're stressed in life? Do you feel like it helps you release some of that?
I'm still trying to figure out why I write poetry, because there are some poets who sort of like wake up at 8 and they work until 5 p.m. They're almost like, they're very disciplined about their practice. I'm not like that. So most of my poetry have been produced sort of unexpectedly. And usually, actually, I think you're right. I think intuitively, you probably felt that I am the type to just write when I have a lot in me, or things are sort of bursting out of me, like they're emotions or waves of thought that are crying out to be released into poetry. They return me to a rhythm of calm that I prefer to have. But usually, yeah, I think stress is the kind of common condition of many of us these days.
So you write when you feel like there's a lot of pressure in the world and you want to release that pressure through your writing.
Yeah, pressure inside, pressure outside, for sure. There's a sense of compression, and to return to a sense of balance or harmony, I think the compression has to be released somehow.
And that's what you're talking about. Like when you write good poetry, it feels like you're going home.
I think so, yeah. Being released back to a space and a rhythm and a time of more quiet.
Where's home for you?
I think geographically, my homeland is Hanoi in Vietnam. It's a city in the north of Vietnam. But I think your question can be thought of philosophically or poetically. And I am increasingly thinking of home as here, some vibration or some breath deep in the body that I'm not always aware of most of the time. But again, with poetry or with friends that vibe or resonate with me, that sense of home becomes clear again. So yeah, home is with me wherever I go because it is me. It is my breath and my voice. I wonder if you have thoughts on your homes.
Yeah, I feel like the question of where home is such a weirdly philosophical one too. It's like there's a geographic one and we can definitely talk about it in a second, but like there is that sort of like, where do you feel most moored? And it could be with someone else. It could be a location. It could be a state of mind. Mm-hmm.
There could be multiple homes.
Absolutely.
Multiple different types
Absolutely.
at the same time.
Yeah.
Different kinds.
Especially with people who are in college. I hear a lot, and for myself too, like, it feels like we're in this weird homeless state where we grew up in some place, we're shipped off across the country or whatever, across the world in some cases. And yet we live in this dorm and it feels like you have to fit your possessions into 3 suitcases.
Yeah.
So it's like, where is home? It's like we're nomads,
Yeah. And then over time you make your friends, you start to know the area, you start to feel more comfortable, and then that becomes a new home.
Absolutely.
And then you're uprooted again, and then you do that process all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when people ask where home is for me, I think it's a very complicated answer, even geographically. I mean, I grew up in Taiwan, but then I went to high school here, and then I also went to college. So it's all of them are home in some way, and like I go back to them for they feel different all of them, but they're all home together.
Yeah, multiple homes. I love that. And also the sense of feeling homelessness. I feel like my dream is to feel at home in homelessness, I would say. Because as you said, Ashley, like we're living in a world where I feel like moving is such a familiar condition. So it's hard. I think we're in for a lot of suffering if we're just attached to one home. But I'm influenced by a lot of Buddhist philosophy, and it's interesting that Buddhists frame the term for sort of, joining the Buddhist path as going forth. But it also, so switza, it means basically you're exiting the home. So you're entering into the condition of homelessness, but not to join suffering, but to be almost away from suffering. Because when you learn to be at home in homelessness, and everywhere is your home. So maybe that could be a very beautiful condition. I'm definitely not at that level.
I mean, I'm not. That's what I was going to ask, because
What are your tricks?
Yeah, I think every time I move, like I am not a type of person who enjoys change or deals with it well by any means. So I think whenever I move to a new place, I always feel very uprooted, and it just doesn't feel... I miss my old home, and I wish I could just enjoy the whole like homelessness state of mind and just feel that. But I'm not there yet. So if anyone has advice, let me know.
Yeah. But there is this beauty in being in this like liminal space of like, I don't know where I'm going. I know where I came from, but I'm just in this like transition area. And like, I feel like, at least for me and a lot of people, it's like, there's an uncomfortable nature about being in the unknown. But from what you're saying, this like Buddhist philosophy is like accepting and embracing this nothingness as your home.
Yeah, I think the journey towards the familiarity or an embrace of the unknown, I think it's not just exclusive to Buddhist thought. I think anybody with a deep religious or spiritual practice, I think they would probably agree with you that there's something quite beautiful, difficult, surely, but beautiful about being okay with being in between, being in the middle of an unknown space, and being all right with that in the body and also in the mind. Yeah, because there's so much that we don't know that actually are the forces that run our lives.
Mm-hmm. And having faith in something better coming, or having faith that this journey is meaningful.
For sure. Yeah, that the journey is it. At least for me, there's no sort of enlightenment or nirvana or even God sort of like way, 200 miles down the line. It's in the journey. It's here. So yeah, but that's probably like the work of a lifetime to be okay with that.
That's so beautiful to just be able to live in the present and not want for anything more, not have like a motive for what you're doing, and just enjoy existing. Is like a feeling that I've chased like all of my life. And I think it's something that a lot of people forget here, specifically, as you were mentioning earlier. It's hard because I feel like people move so fast that it's hard to just be present in the moment and just have existence be enough.
Yeah. Are there moments outside of poetry that make you feel particularly at home?
When I slow down, it's very related to what Ashley just said. When I'm not pulled away from myself so violently by the fast pace of things. And I was watching, before we started this conversation, it was quite beautiful looking at you two preparing for the conversation, because, you were trying to change the battery of this recorder. You were trying to set up all the right technical environment for us to start this conversation. But I think the way that you did it was so calm, both of you, and you were, still listening to one another as you spoke. And I think that's also one way of being at home with oneself, which is to somehow just be attentive to everything within and around us all the time. Again, it's really hard to make it a practice from moment to moment, which is, I think, what true Buddhists do. I'm not a true Buddhist, so I forget all the time. So I do sort of, get stressed out by little things during the day. But I think the moment that I remember to slow all the way down and to really listen to my own inner voice and other people's voices, I think that's a beautiful way of going home.
Has that happened recently?
I think it's happening now as the three of us are talking in this room. It's quite rare and it's quite beautiful when it happens at Stanford, where, again, we have so many resources and so many brilliant minds, and yet everyone is sort of rushed and hasty and stressed out all the time, which is, I think, a deep shame. So every time I think, just, 2 or 3 people, it doesn't need to be a crowd, sit down together and have a chat in a slow, rhythmic manner, or even if you just sit in silence together, I think it's very beautiful. It's a very beautiful space to be. And even if we do it by ourselves, I think it could be cool too. There's so much within one body already, so you can just gather with yourself in your room. That could also be a way of going home.
It goes to the idea of letting go again. As we were trying to replace the batteries and the batteries didn't work, it was sort of like, breathe in, breathe out and move on and find more batteries. You don't have to be anxious about it. The world's not ending. It's just your idea of slowing down and finding beauty in everything that is around us.
Yeah, I try to, although it's hard. Again, there's something about Stanford, which is this epicenter of the technological world of advancement that we're living in, that makes presence very, very hard.
Do you feel like in other places, like in Vietnam, Hanoi, the pace was different? Is that where you're taking a lot of this philosophy from as well?
These days, yeah, I think I'm finding more slowness and more calm when I'm in Vietnam. But it's funny because if you live in Vietnam, especially in the city, which I do, I was born in Hanoi, but now I live in Saigon, so in the south of Vietnam. And both Hanoi and Saigon are increasingly busier and busier every day. They're the centers of Vietnam, so people go there for jobs and opportunities. So traffic's terrible. It's really dusty. It's heavily polluted. But because I have sort of my own space, my own studio in Vietnam, and I'm not sort of having to go to classes all the time or, teaching, all the responsibilities that we have at Stanford. And so I do live almost like a free spirit. I feel like that's a part of it. Like my calendar in Vietnam is very, very empty.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. It's so multicolored when I'm at Stanford, but it's just empty when I'm in Vietnam.
Like a dream.
That's
to
the
me
life
right now.
Absolutely. So can you describe the studio back in Vietnam? What does that look like?
Well, the studio is within the apartment that I have with my partner. And my partner created this garden within our space. So my workspace is sort of next to a small but verdant garden that we tend every day together. There's not much in the studio. It's mostly just books. Both my partner and I are quite nerdy and book lovers. So it's just plants and books in the space, which I think it's very conducive to my work. I think poetry is, in a way, it is a garden. It is a library for me. So I live in that. There's
a garden inside the apartment?
It's a domestic garden, but it's also close to the windows and the balcony. So there's natural light coming in, but there are also plants that are okay with living inside. And it's amazing. It's amazing to see them grow so strongly and vibrantly and verdantly.
But so that studio is different than your childhood home?
Yes, because that's a studio in Saigon. My childhood home in Hanoi is no longer ours because my parents also moved to Saigon lately. So they had to sell our whole old house in Hanoi to afford a new space in Saigon. So I miss it a lot. It was also a house with a big garden. My mom's also a big gardener. And so, yeah, it's probably the one thing that I miss most about that house, that it's just the routine of watching my mother every day. She would clean the rice that we eat every day and save the water that you clean the rice with, because it's the water that holds the nutrition of the rice, and then walk around the garden and feeding each plant quite carefully, making sure that we don't overwater or underwater. Yeah, and it was in a quiet neighborhood in Hanoi, not too central, but not too far out. And it was close to all of the schools that I went to. Yeah, throughout my childhood and teenage years in Vietnam.
You were just surrounded by these plants and nature and quietness, even growing up.
I think so. I didn't realize that until you asked me, but you're right. There's something, about almost a seclusion among plants that I love and I was lucky enough to grow up with. I'm curious about how you would describe your childhood homes.
Do you want to go?
Yeah. My childhood home was Hsinchu, Taiwan, in Science Park. So it's the Silicon Valley of Taiwan, basically. It's a mid-sized city. The air always smelled like gasoline or like the smoke that comes from cars. I don't even know what to call that. Car fumes.
Yeah.
The air was car fumes. I remember I would like walk to school with my mom, and sometimes she said that she would have like black like fumes like in her nose because there was just a lot of smoke. There was a lot, like it's like the mopeds and the cars, and I think a lot of that noise is still something that like I remember, like it's going through my ears right now, like the noise of the mopeds and the cars and like the hustle and bustle of the city. Yeah, I loved it. And I think in college I went to Santa Barbara, which is very naturey. Is very, very, very different from Hsinchu, Taiwan. Not a city, just like the ocean. And I lived on the ocean. And I think being around that nature all the time completely changed like my entire outlook. I think before that, I was always a little bit more, always like on the go, doing stuff. And I think the first time I was able to slow down was there, because it was just like I would just be going on a walk and looking out into the world. And I was like, nothing else matters beyond this point. And I think I lived like that for 4 years, and it was like the most beautiful time of my life. I felt so grounded, and all the stress I felt from the day instantly went away as soon as I took a walk. And it was just so easy to just be like, we live in this world. We all live in this world. We're all just existing, just trying our best to live our little lives and be happy. And it was just very different from my childhood. I love both, but there's a different perspective I think I took from both.
Yeah, there's so much of like looking at the ocean and feeling insignificant. Like whatever, like sure, if you fail the test, whatever, in the grand scheme of things.
In the grand scheme of things, the waves are crashing. Yeah. We're just looking out into the sunset, and that's going to happen every single day, and it's beautiful.
Absolutely. Did you go surfing?
I tried. I went surfing a lot. I'm not the best surfer, but I did go surfing a lot. I went paddleboarding, sailing. Like it was
incredible.
It's like you have to do it when you're in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, it's Santa Barbara.
I think like it was so easy to disconnect. Like, I mean, I do like neuroscience stuff, so I would be doing that in the day, stressed about it for whatever reason. And then sunset came around, and I was like, let me just go paddleboarding. And then instantly I forgot. Like, it was so easy to just forget what stress I had in the day and just enjoy the water, touch the water, jump in the water, just enjoy. And that is a feeling I'm still trying to get back, because I just started here. And obviously the ocean isn't right here.
For the non-US or non-California listeners, can you describe where Santa Barbara is?
Santa Barbara is 2 hours north of LA. Yes, it's a little beach town. It's similar to San Diego, but much smaller. There's one street, it's called State Street, which has all the shops and stuff. And then everything else is kind of just mostly like residential, suburban, and UCSB is like it's on the cliffs on the beach. So on the way to class, I would be walking pretty much like on the beach. And then in lab, our view was the ocean. So sometimes before I went into lab, there would be these benches where you can like overseeing the ocean. And before I went to the lab, I would just sit in the bench and just look at it for a little bit. Yeah. And then I realized the other people in my lab also did that, because I would see them there too and be like, oh, so we're all just before we go to lab, after we go to lab.
We all have that need.
Yeah,
to look
it was a beautiful way to ground myself in everything that, like, every moment of my life, it was constantly like, I'm going to do this. If it doesn't work out, it's okay.
That's the thing I noticed about the three of us. Like, we all have this desire to slow down, this desire to reconnect with things outside of our lives. Look at the ocean, look at the plants, and that's really beautiful.
What about you, Max? I know you also have a huge thing for
Let's hear
oceans.
it.
Oh my goodness. No, it's so funny because it's almost the opposite of you, Ashley. I grew up in this small village of 4,000 people up in upstate New York. So if you imagine New York City, you drive around 3 or 4 miles, 3 or 4 hours north, and then you go west until you hit the Great Lakes. You bounce back a little bit. That's Syracuse. It's central New York. I grew up in this small village called Manlius. 4,000 people, 95% white people. Nothing really happened there. We had swans. We had like one shack called Snowtop where you had ice cream. And like my whole world was just, the neighborhood kids. We'd go out and we'd do like, I don't know, Ghost in the Graveyard, which is like a yard game. And it was a pretty small world for me. And it reminded me of like, let me set the scene there. It's because I was in this small village, I was in this pretty new housing development. So there was like new houses, but then like you could walk for like half a minute and you would get right onto a soybean farm. You'd get right onto, you'd actually get onto a road and the road led to a Mormon church. But you would just have these like really random, like deserted stuff, old barns. There was a horse farm just like a couple miles north. Like it was just very peaceful. And, during the pandemic, I basically spent 15 months within like a 1 mile radius. And what I would do is I would, just go into the woods behind my house, and there were these like little trails, and I would just sit on the logs, especially during winter, and I would just like see the snow fall down. And for me during the pandemic, it was like a very stifling, chaotic time, like it was for a lot of people. And just like sitting on that log alone, nobody went into the woods back then. I realized now that it was a little bit unsafe, but back then it's just like I was in the woods alone at night. You kind of hear the coyotes. You can kind of see the snow. You can smell the snow. Snow smells smoky. And, that's where I call home. But then I come here to the Bay Area and it feels like a city to me. It feels like there's a lot of people here. There's a lot more diversity. There's just a lot more things going on. And I just remember in undergrad feeling exactly as you were saying, Quyên, like this chaos and wanting to get away. And I just felt like looking at the ocean, or even we're sitting in this room right now, and this room overlooks this little lake here on campus, which is technically just a pit in the ground. It's a lake. But especially during my sophomore year, I would go and just walk around the lake in open quotations, and it would ground me. It makes me feel like I'm back at home in some ways. Like anytime I'm out in nature, I feel like in some ways I'm back at home. And I spent 3 months in San Diego this summer, and after work, I would just go to the cliffs and I would look out at the water and I would climb down the sandstone cliffs, and it would feel all right again, no matter what was going on in life, But yeah, it was very much like I grew up surrounded by nature. Unlike you, Ashley, you kind of discovered it later, but then like I tried to get it into the Bay Area when I was here,
Yeah, I think it did come to me later, and I realized you could live like this. And I was like, I never want to go back.
It's like, you don't want to go back. Yeah.
I agree. Like, I think here, there's a lot of chaos. Like, I feel like my life is very chaotic right now, and I don't want it to be. But it's just like, as you said, like the calendar is there's so much happening every single day. I'm like constantly losing control, I feel like, of my life here.
You're always running.
Yeah.
You're like, oh God.
From place to place, person to person. Like it's I don't know how to, I think I need to find the thing that will allow me to just, the beach. I need to find the version of the beach here.
Find your beach.
Exactly. Maybe it's the empty lake.
Yeah, maybe it's the empty lake. But I want to talk about Stanford a little bit because Quyên, you and we both did undergrad here. I'm sure that you experienced a lot of the chaos at Stanford. What was that like? Like, when did you start your undergrad here?
I started in 2012 and I graduated in 2017. So a few years before you entered your freshman year here. But yeah, I probably was equally chaotic as most undergraduate experiences. I think it's not just Stanford, but I think human beings in our youth are quite chaotic, at least in my case. So I don't think I can blame it wholly on the external conditions of Stanford being a very busy campus, but it was also more just me not yet knowing who I really am, a little bit nervous and anxious about being in a new country. I had moved from from Vietnam, from Hanoi to Stanford when I was 18, so quite young. And so all of that contributed to an exciting, surely very adventurous and thrilling experience of going to college in America, which was my dream for a long time. And also, it was busy and chaotic. I was doing 20 units per quarter. So
As we all do.
That was not fun.
Kudos to you.
Yeah. No, it's like this, at least we called it like duck syndrome. It's almost like when you see a duck on the water, everything's calm, but if you look at its feet, it's just like scrabbling away at the water. And it's like, it feels like that, at least for my generation on campus, where everyone's like, oh, it was so easy for me to, do this test or get this assignment done. And it's like, oh, it's not too hard. Don't worry about it. But like everyone's just really struggling and they're almost like putting up this facade of having fun. But I don't know, was that like that for you back in your Stanford days?
Yeah, I think the ideology of the duck syndrome was there when I was here. It's sort of like built into the DNA of the space. It's not great because once again, I think, there's almost like a disconnection between who we're trying to perform as and who we really are truly when we're at home. So when that separation happens, it's usually quite painful.
Yeah, because it feels like we're playing a role of being like happy and principled.
Very California philosophy, or maybe NorCal. Everyone's happy and having fun, but underneath all of it, they're working their ass off.
Yes, absolutely. It's very two-faced, and that's the one thing that personally I didn't like about Stanford is that like if you're struggling, if you're trying really hard, like just make it apparent. Because then it feels like other people who are struggling will also know that like people are struggling. It's not just you. I think that's the worst feeling of like just being alone. Like I'm not good enough. Everyone else is doing so much better,
There could be so much community in that to be able to say like we are all tired and working so much. And I feel like something could come from that. But I think here people refuse to acknowledge that they work so hard. It sends a certain message that I think isn't entirely genuine.
Mm-hmm. But when you look back at undergrad and then you're a grad student now, like are there big differences to your undergrad experience versus your grad experience, even though they're on the same campus?
I think just by virtue of me having grown older, that it's less chaotic now. Not that I've eliminated chaos, nor do I would want to. I think a little bit of chaos or agitation, actually, it's good for me. It reminds me that, there is this space, this beach or this cliffside or this empty lake that I can go to. So it's nice actually to have some contrast. But I feel like as a grad student now, I do love to go to the Papua New Guinea garden that's very close to us, the garden of beautiful sculptures, or the empty lake. I love the emptiness of it. There was this one time when it was filled with water and it was super gorgeous, but now it's back to its emptiness. And I think, there's something profound about that too, that a lake can be empty and still be so fulfilling to us.
You can still be a lake without water.
Yeah.
So true.
But I'm a supporter of chaos. I feel like there's something about that adds spice into your life. Gives you a purpose to go to the ocean.
The beauty of life is that it can be chaotic and then you will have a reason to ground yourself and
Absolutely.
go to the beach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just think I love chaos.
Me too.
I just think chaos needs to have some kind of release. And right now, it's very little of that.
Yes. Many people feel the same.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in your journey to the US. You said you were 18 when you moved from Vietnam to the US. Like that's quite a cultural shock, right? Is it very different cultures? What was that journey like?
I think it's probably not unique compared to other international students who move to the US. There's a lot of adjustment that we have to do. I remember during freshman year, I was in this program called SLE. I don't know if SLE was still around when you were at
Structured
Stanford.
Liberal Arts Experience. That's what it's called. The SLE kids. Oh.
Yeah.
Is that a Stanford thing?
Yeah, it's a Stanford thing.
Okay.
They live in different dorms. Was that the case for you?
We lived in Flomo. Is that not the case
the SLE
anymore?
dorm. Yeah. Downstairs.
Yeah. So we lived together and we read really canonical books together in philosophy and literature. I think it's similar to what's called the Great Books program that I think Americans have on the East Coast, a little bit like that. And because my English was a little bit shaky then, so it was a lot of catching up to do in terms of my reading and English. And I noticed that in the US, students are encouraged to speak a lot. It's a talking culture, whereas I grew up in a much more silent culture. People in my family are quiet, so we sort of communicate through food or kind of glances. It's kind of difficult to sort of read my parents sometimes because they don't really use many words unless they're angry, and then there would be
that happens.
a torrential stream of words. But yeah, so I was also having to adjust to like knowing how to speak up and perform a certain sort of eloquence that was demanded of me at Stanford. Yeah, so a lot of academic things to get used to, but also I think somatic. Like I just had to talk a lot more than I was used to, so that was quite a change.
Like I can't help but think about that connection with poetry, where like growing up in a slightly more quiet place, it's almost like each word is more important. Versus here, I absolutely agree. People talk a lot. Sometimes people should be talking less.
Yes.
You know?
That is so real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've noticed a huge difference in my life. The people here in general, and like all of my life before this, I think I've gotten, I'm actually very introverted usually. Like I think don't talk as much, but when I do talk, there's substance. Or like other people, my friends are also the same way. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we would just sit in silence and just be around each other. And that was enough. And I do miss the fact of just like existing around each other was enough in silence. And here I can't get a break. Yeah.
That does feel like a pretty difficult thing to overcome, especially coming from a more quieter place and learning to essentially have your voice and to speak out in public, right?
Yeah. And it's not just the fact that I came from a quiet home place, but also I think philosophically and spiritually, I also have a lot of resistance towards language. I love it. It's what I do as a writer, and it's the only thing that I have to communicate with other human beings. But at some point, as you too have said, there's such beauty and power in silence that when you look at an ocean, you look at the sun sinking away, you look at the trees swaying by the lake, no words are needed. And a lot of the profound things that we feel in the body, words can't express. So yeah, I think that understanding of the limit of language is also makes it hard for me to participate in this constant discoursing culture of the American university.
Sometimes you really can't summarize whatever you're experiencing in language. You can try. I feel like that's sometimes, for me, what poetry is trying to inflict a certain special feeling in someone else. This very tight communication channel, but it's still very hard. I really get that resistance to using language to describe everything, because sometimes you can't.
Yeah. And why summarize? Why feel this obligation to summarize? I think we're asked to do it a lot in our assignment, in our Canvas post, in our presentations. We're asked to give out, let's say, 5 bullet points so people can sort of take away. But I don't think life can be summarized into bullet points, and I don't think it needs to be taken away. I think it needs to be lived, and sometimes silently. But again, poets and artists teach us that language can also be used beautifully. And even within Buddhism, which is a philosophy and a religion, also extremely skeptical of language. There are many koans that basically defy logic, and, instead of a teacher telling you a lesson or a lecture, he would whack you in the head or say nothing or just laugh or scream. So I find Buddhist rhetoric interesting because they present many, sometimes quite funny alternative to just speaking a whole lot. Buddhist literature is also very abundant, so they also use many words to talk about the need for no word. So there's also, I think, that funny need for a balance, similar to what you said about needing both chaos and peace. So I think we also need sometimes a lot of language and then sometimes none at all.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the most beautiful, like memorable moments of my life have been me existing in silence, either by myself or with other people, but just silently, just like existing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you find yourself chasing them.
Yeah, I'm chasing that right now. I haven't had moments like that recently.
Me too.
But
Sometimes you go a long time without having those moments, but when you experience them, you know. It's like, this is one of those moments.
it's not something that you can like force or something that you can try to get. It just happens and you're like, this, like, I have to be like this is the way.
Yeah.
And then you get pulled back in. But like there are a few moments in my life where I've really just been able to exist and be like this is it. And those are the moments I still remember so clearly. And sometimes I like to take a picture when it happens, and I remember it forever.
Yeah, that's also about letting go, like letting the feelings come through you without needing to describe them, without needing to quantify them, but just letting it happen. So when did you get into Buddhist thought? Has that something been with you ever since growing up, or was there a moment where you discovered it?
It was later. I grew up in a pretty atheistic household. It was probably in college that I was sort of more interested in Buddhist thought, thanks to friends, very important spiritual friends, and also teachers, I consider them, who was on the path before me. And honestly, I don't think my friends in college, my two important friends, their names are Chen Sing-han and Trent Walker, and they're incredible writers, poets, I would call them, very poetic writers who were Stanford students, so we knew each other through Stanford. And I don't think they really came to me with the idea of like introducing me to Buddhism, but because I just was so moved by their kindness and their compassion and their way of moving in the world so gently and generously and spaciously, that over time I was just like, okay, maybe there is some mysterious beauty to this thing called the teachings of the Buddha. And so I was curious about Buddhism by way of them, but it was not because they were trying to convert me or anything. And I'm not sure if I believe in the rhetoric of conversion, but it was almost like snow or rain or wind sort of absorbing into my body over time, their kindness and their way of deeply understanding the world.
And it sounds like this is something that you are still studying and still interested in.
Yeah, I don't think I will ever stop learning, not just about Buddhism, but about the world and other religious and spiritual practices. Yeah, it's endless, and that's the beauty.
Yeah. I'm curious about your professional journey. You did undergrad at Stanford, and now you're doing your PhD. Can you talk more about what you're doing in your PhD?
I'm doing my PhD in art history, although I think of myself primarily as a writer and a translator. But art has also been very important. I didn't grow up with a lot of art. My parents had a huge appreciation for beauty, but we didn't have access to a lot of museums in Vietnam. And my parents didn't study art either, so I didn't grow up thinking a lot about it, really. Literature was a more familiar land because my mom read a lot. She was always talking about Tolstoy and Pushkin and Chekhov. But I got into art history as an undergrad at Stanford. It's been a beautiful journey to try to write or translate art into not too many words, but just the right amount of words. So to me, art history is also very related to writing and to also translation, which is what I do. I translate between Vietnamese and English, literarily mostly.
What forms of art do you work with the most?
I study all kinds, really. I do love good old traditional pictures like paintings and drawings, but I also look at sculptures, installations. I love dance, so performative arts. I also love, again, as with poetry, any artwork that moves me rhythmically, that gives me a sense of breath. I would love to spend a lot of time with it.
And with translation, it's not as simple as what some people might think it is, right? It's not just the literal meaning. It's more about translating what the art feels like.
Yeah, I think that's probably closer to my philosophy of translation. You're trying to translate the resonance, the vibration, the feeling not a kind of like word by word sort of translation, although that could also be beautiful, a very technical, loyal translation to the original. But I think I'm more of a translator who translates the feel, which is very hard to translate.
Running on time. This has been just such an amazing hour with you, just talking about things that are very important, not just academics, but how we live life, how we decide to let go and experience things that defy language. And I think it's something that we all need a reminder of, to live. To say it so simply is like, you need to remember to live.
Yeah. Need to remember that it's okay to just exist. We're all just existing in this world, and that by itself can be okay. Nothing else has to come.
What an amazing hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Imagine the World, where we hear from inspiring members of the KHS community who are making significant contributions in their respective fields, challenging the status quo and pushing the boundaries of what is possible as they imagine the world they want to see.
This podcast is sponsored by Knight-Hennessy Scholars at Stanford University, a multidisciplinary, multicultural graduate fellowship program providing scholars with financial support to pursue graduate studies at Stanford while helping equip them to be visionary, courageous, and collaborative leaders who address complex challenges facing the world. Follow us on social media at Knight-Hennessy and visit our website at kh.stanford.edu to learn more about the program and our community.